So I'd like to start by paying homage to the Lord Buddha, offering salutation to senior and junior monks respectively. Greetings to all the supporters and distinguished guests who have joined with this online funeral chanting today, especially Khun Panada Thanissaro, the daughter of the deceased, who is called Khun Huangsieng Saelor. Today is the 20th of October 2020. I am Phra Nicholas Thanissaro of Dhamma International Meditation Center in Azusa, and today I would like to share a short Dhamma talk on the topic of the benefits of attending a funeral. If in the midst of tragedy of losing a loved one there can be a silver lining for all those attending a funeral, whether it is a celebration of life or religious funeral ceremonies generally, mostly the reasons a person joins would emphasize social convention or just being part of the grieving process. However, with a Buddhist funeral, there are many more reasons to attend a funeral which are of benefit, not only to the person who has passed on, but also to the bereaved relatives and to ourselves as well. The benefits of a Buddhist funeral amount to at least 6 things, which I will mention briefly and then explain in more detail. Firstly, to attend the school of life. Secondly, to change our attitudes. Thirdly, to study the principles of Dhamma in life, otherwise known as abhinhapaccavekkhana, and put Dhamma into practice in everyday life. Fourthly, the opportunity to give and find forgiveness. Fifthly, the opportunity to recollect on good deeds, teachings, and the example that the deceased has set during their life. And lastly, to show compassion for bereaved relatives. The benefits of a Buddhist funeral are so great that traditionally the funeral of any person will be held several times in the 7 days leading up to the cremation ceremony. So the first benefit of attending a funeral is that it has educational value. Going to a funeral is like going to a class on the value of life, where the deceased is a teacher and those attending the funeral are the students. For this subject, there is no guarantee whether the students will pass the exam or not. No one knows for sure except for the denizens of purgatory, who might be thought of as the independent examination board for the Academy of Life. Although throughout our lives we collect up good and bad karma, and if we have more good karma than bad, then we will pass the exam and graduate to rebirth in the fortunate realms. But which exact realm depends on how much goodness we have collected. If your goodness is not enough, you may need to repeat the class in the human realm, or you may slip into the unfortunate realms. The compulsory subjects to pass the exam include generosity, keeping the precepts, meditating, the 10 perfections, and so forth. And when we say that attending a funeral is like going back to school, it is a special school where no cheating is possible. You can't outsmart the denizens of the purgatory, who know the karma of each person and the afterlife destinations they have earned. At the moment, we are doing our homework to submit to them. Anyone who does a karmic deed cannot escape the outcome of that deed. Anyone who doesn't do anything wrong will not suffer from the retribution. Every time we attend a funeral, it's like we evaluate our study outcome. That is, our intentional acts of body, speech, and mind, and whether they are lacking or weak, so that we can remedy this before it's too late to change, so that we don't fail the exam. There's no possibility for cheating because everything we think, say, or do are recorded in the most reliable instrument in the world, that is, our own mind. And when we come to a funeral, we have to face up to the fact that the deceased could take nothing with them upon leaving this world. Everything but their karma has to be shared out amongst their relatives. We come into this world empty-handed and we leave it empty-handed. The only thing we can take with us is wholesomeness that we call merit, or unwholesomeness that we call demerit. Merit will lead a person to the fortunate realms, but demerit will lead a person to the unfortunate realms. There is an old Thai riddle that describes our human condition as 4 things carry you: 3 things follow you. 1 thing is carried. 2 things sit at the side. 4 things carrying means all people are composed of the 4 great elements: earth, water, wind, and fire, and there are no exceptions to this. Eventually, at the end of our lives, these 4 elements must return to nature, so our body must break down. 3 things following means that we are subject to the 3 universal characteristics: anicca, impermanence; dukkhang, suffering; and anatta, not self. There's another riddle that illustrates the universal characteristics that become obvious as we become older. What was black turns white, that is our hair. What was long becomes short, that is our eyesight. What was firm becomes shaky, that is our teeth. What was precise becomes deaf, that is our hearing. What was sharp becomes dull, that is our thinking. What was clear becomes cloudy, that is our memory. In other words, our body is constantly changing, it cannot stay the same. We cannot prevent it from changing. The one thing which is carried is the human mind, the mind which, when we die, must continue searching for a new rebirth until it uproots the defilements and we can enter upon nirvana. The 2 things at your side are merit and demerit. Merit will lead you towards the fortunate realms, such as the 6 heavens, the 16 Brahma realms, and so forth. Demerit will lead you to the unfortunate realms, such as the animal realm, hungry ghosts, hell realms, and the asuras or demons. This is what we mean by the benefit of a funeral, of joining a lesson in the Academy of Life, learning about the nature of our existence. The second thing we get from attending a funeral is to change our attitude. We will modify our drunken complacency with life that leads us to assume we will live forever, to realize we cannot avoid death. In this way, we acknowledge death as one of the 4 heavenly messengers, or Devadutta, which are the reasons that Siddhartha Gautama decided to renounce the royal palace and ordain as a monk, until eventually becoming enlightened as the Buddha. Attending a funeral will help us not to deny the reality of death, and to respond sensibly to death rather than suffering from shock. Most important is that we need to change our attitude towards the realization that death is not the end of the story, that when we die we must continue in further rebirths. The part of us that searches for a new rebirth is our mind, but when the mind leaves the body, we call it merely our spirit. Therefore, it needs to collect up the maximum of good deeds in our lives while avoiding unwholesome behaviors to serve us well in lifetimes to come, and use as a stepping stone towards nirvana. To help us change our attitudes, some chanting we often hear at a funeral is anicca vata sankhara, concern the fact that nothing conditioned is permanent, not least the life of our loved one who has passed away. Therefore, when the monks accept the picked up robes, you will hear them say the words which come from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta of the Digha Nikaya, which mean, impermanent indeed are the conditioned things. Their nature is to arise and decay. Having arisen, they cease. Happy is their stilling. This is the second benefit of funerals in helping us to change our attitudes. The third benefit of attending a funeral is that we can study the principles of Dhamma that every being must confront in life. That of the habitual reflections, or abhinhapaccavekkhana, which you're probably familiar with from the Buddhist evening chanting. By habitual reflections, the Buddha meant that there are items of Dhamma which we need to reflect on habitually, with every in-breath and every out-breath, namely that we are of a nature to age, we have not yet gone beyond aging. We are of a nature to sicken, we have not yet gone beyond sickening. We are of a nature to die, we have not gone beyond dying. We must sooner or later be separated from all loved ones and treasured things. We are the owners of our actions, we are heir to our karma. We have karma as our origin, we have karma as our creed, we have karma as our refuge. Whatever actions we perform, be they good or evil, we will receive the consequences. The most striking of these habitual reflections is the inevitability of death. If we were to ask which is scarier, being born or dying, we would have to say that they are equally scary, because every time we're born, it will end up with us dying. In addition to learning Dharma principles, we need to put teachings into practice. We should put what we've learned at a funeral into practice to get the full benefit, in order to generate the maximum merit both for ourselves and for the deceased who has passed away. Best way to do this is to take the Dhamma principles that we learned at a funeral, especially the funeral Dhamma talk, and put them into practice in everyday lives. For example, in the words of the Maranasati Sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, which explains how to reflect on death as a way to encourage spiritual effort in one's everyday life, I quote, "Mindfulness of death, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and benefit, culminating in the deathless. When day has receded and night has approached, a person should reflect. I could die on account of many causes, such as a snake bite, falling, food poisoning, disturbance of bile, phlegm, or wind. Therefore you should reflect, do I have any bad, unwholesome habits that I have overlooked, which could be an obstacle for me if I were to die tonight? If you have any remaining unwholesome habits, you should strive with extraordinary effort, zeal, enthusiasm, indefatigability, mindfulness, and clear comprehension to abandon those unwholesome habits." This is the third benefit we get from learning Dharma principles and putting them into practice in our everyday lives. The fourth benefit we get from participating in a funeral is the opportunity for forgiveness. Whether the funeral is for someone we know or not, we should take the opportunity to ask forgiveness every time, because we may have done something to trespass against that person in the past, in actions of our body, speech, and mind, in front of them or behind their back, or without intention, that we can remember, or which is beyond our recall, from however many lifetimes ago or in the present lifetime. We need to ask forgiveness from the deceased in the same way. Some people may wonder why we need to ask forgiveness or forgive people we don't know, such as distant relatives or even strangers. And the reason is that the Buddha taught that there's no one in this world who at some time in the past has never been one of our relatives. We've all been part of each other's family at some time in the past, because we have countless rebirths in our past. If we were to pile up the bones from all our previous rebirths, it would be as tall as a mountain. If we were to gather up all the tears that we've cried from our suffering in previous lifetimes, it would be enough salt water to fill up the whole wide ocean. Therefore, whenever we attend a funeral, we should ask forgiveness from and forgive the deceased every time, perhaps by saying the verses for forgiveness in our mind, or just by making the intention. This is the fourth benefit of attending funerals, as the opportunity to give and receive forgiveness. A fifth benefit of attending a funeral is the opportunity to celebrate and learn from the good deeds and the teachings the deceased person exemplified during their life, what is known in other spiritual traditions as a eulogy, because eulogy virtues are more enduring than virtue signaling or the so-called virtues captured on people's Facebook pages. If everyone who remembers a person can gather together all those person's good points, it will serve as an inspiration to those who survive them. This is the fifth benefit of attending a funeral, the opportunity to celebrate the goodness of the deceased. Finally, the sixth advantage of attending a funeral is that we get to show compassion to the relatives who have been bereaved. There are many critical times when it's important for us to be generous to others, when they fall on hard times, when they go bankrupt, when they are sick, and when they are bereaved. All four of these circumstances, when a person loses someone they love, is the most important of all, because it's the final chance we have to show respect for that person. We have to help each other out in society, because when it comes to our turn, we will need to rely on the support of others in the same way. Therefore, when we hear that someone we know has died, and we attend their funeral, we are following in the footsteps of the wise ones of yore, who set an example of solidarity with our fellows who have suffered loss. In conclusion, there are 6 things that we get from attending a funeral. Firstly, to attend the school of life. Secondly, to change our attitudes. Thirdly, to study the principles of the Dharma in life, or abhinhapaccavekkhana, and put Dhamma practice into practice in everyday life. Fourthly, the opportunity for forgiveness. Fifthly, the opportunity to recollect good deeds, teachings, and example the deceased did during their life. And last of all, to show compassion for the bereaved relatives. All of us eventually will be separated from loved ones and treasured things, but the manner in which we become old, sick, or separated has a chance to minimize suffering if we avoid recklessness. Imina kata punya nena. Through the power of the merits arising from the Dhamma talk today, may the deceased, that is, the Venerable, the Khun Mae, the mother of Panada Thanet Warasan, that is, Khun Huangsieng Saelor, enjoy only happiness and prosperity in their new rebirth according to the wishes of the supporters on this occasion. May those merits bring all supporters long life, strong health, strength, happiness, quick-wittedness, whatever good things you wish for in life. May those things come to you easily in every way. And now, before we hear the Abhidhamma chanting, I would like to invite everyone now to recollect the merits arising as a result of attending a funeral today, as we sit for a few moments of meditation together, following the instructions of the Venerable Dhammachiyo from Thailand.